Um, it's been a couple of weeks, and I think originally when I started this last year, early last year, the idea was to go into our history, our background, the reasons why we have the government that we do, excuse me, and how that developed over the many centuries, and we arrived where we are. A book that I've had for a while, and most people will be familiar, is by a man named George Orwell, who was a socialist to a certain extent, but he was probably an early 20th century different than the way we think of the word now. He was a very English man, and of course he's world famous for the books 1984 and The Animal Farm, where he warned against a lot of the things that go on and come about because of collectivism. And collectivism is one of those things that they sound great. We're going to make everybody equal. Everybody's going to share. No one's going to be any better than anybody else. And that so far has never worked out. Karl Marx, and Frederick Engels, who wrote the original Communist Manifesto, and the communes were going to be those where everybody got along, everybody had exactly what they needed, no one would be overly ambitious and try to achieve this or that or whatever. And the thing is, of course, that the people who want to run everything always get in charge of that. And if it's not collectivism, it's a monarchy, or it's an aristocracy, or it's an oligarchy, or whatever. There's always a small group of people who get control. And that was one of the things that Orwell was writing about and warning about. And a small book that I have by him, it's called Why I Write. And I've always admired this. They're essays. And on the cover of the book is political language is designed to make lies sound truthful and murder respectable, and to give an appearance of solidity to pure wind. And like right now, we have in the United States and in other places, but particularly in our country going on right now, you have people wailing and gnashing their teeth about the threat to our democracy. Well, for one thing, and I've said this before, the United States is not a democracy. It is a republic of states. It was formed by the states. It's a federal republic. And the states had much more power originally than they do now. And that moving started probably in the end of the 19th century. Woodrow Wilson, with the help of World War I, and kind of grouped that in even more to where the federal government was more in charge. And one of the things most people don't realize is that we didn't have an income tax, and we had to pass an amendment to the federal Constitution in order to have an income tax. And a deal was made with the prohibitionists, who a lot of them were very good people, and they were trying to prevent drunkenness and that sort of thing, always with the best of intentions. But the government, one of their federal government's primary sources of income were distilleries and breweries. That was a huge source of their income. So they struck a deal with the prohibitionists whereby they would work to get the amendment passed where they could have an income tax and the federal government would have prohibition. Well, maybe a lot of people don't know this anymore, but the 1920s were about roughly 10 to 12, end of the 30s, we had prohibition, where drinking alcohol was strictly illegal. And all it did was give gangsters a lot of money, a whole lot of money. And they ended up buying politicians, and that's funny. Politicians seem to be, always seem to be able to buy politicians. But you get this congregation congealing, this movement toward a centralization of government, of experts who are going to know better about how we live. And again, Orwell warned about that. If you read 1984, and there are a lot of people today that look at 1984 not as a warning, but as an instruction manual on how they're going to. And it's strange because when you look at cancel culture and all these other things, that's exactly coming out of 1984, and even in the Animal Farm. But so the thing is we in the last several decades have done a terrible job of teaching people about who we are and where we came from and how we got here. Yes, we made a boatload of mistakes and will continue to make a boatload of mistakes. But the thing is people were always trying, by and large, to do better. And even the quote unquote the elite used to, if you came out of Harvard or Princeton or Yale or any of the Ivies, you were pretty grounded in Western civilization and in thought. I mean, the philosophers and yes, Western civilization borrowed from a lot of people. That's what civilizations do. If you have a good idea, then why should you avoid it? Because it didn't come from you, So we brought all that in, and we came here, came there, and I've talked about that to a certain extent. But we were always trying to be better, and a BA degree taught you, one, how to think critically, to use their reasoning abilities. And when I was in college in the 1960s, I don't remember the number, but used to Fortune magazine, I think they still do it, Fortune magazine had the Fortune 500, the 500 biggest and best corporations that they would publish every year. And most of the Fortune 500 companies were run by people with BA degrees. They majored in history or English or whatever. Because they came out of that with very good critical reasoning abilities. If you study history properly, and again, I've said this before, you learn how to look at how things were. You see how people worked on them or didn't work on them, what the results were, and that got us to the present day. And you're having the same problems nearly always, and you study what people did before. How can you apply that now and look at what you do in the future? Well, that's what business people do. That's what business people are. They used to, and a business wants to, and this is something else they used to do. You wanted to make the best possible product for the least amount of money. And at one time in the 1950s, when I was a boy growing up, the United States workforce was the highest paid workforce in the world that produced high quality, low cost goods. And how did that happen? Well, taxes and regulations, but that's another story. But those taxes and regulations came about because of the collectivist approach. We want to make everything this way or that way, or we're going to make it better, and we're going to achieve utopia, heaven on earth. Well, when you try to achieve heaven on earth, generally what you get is hell on earth. And you've seen that with the Soviet Union, you see it with the Chinese communists, you've seen it with Vietnam, you see it with Venezuela, and it goes on and on. A lot of people look at the Scandinavian countries, and that's kind of a weird mix. Yes, they have some socialist ideas and rules, but so do we. But they've mixed it with a lot of capitalism. Now, can capitalism go wrong? Yeah, it can, because people get so wrapped up in, I want to make as much as I can, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I'm going to squash these people below me. and pay them less and less and less money. And part of going to China was because of that. And now, I mean, again, when I was growing up and in college in the 50s, you could walk into a men's store and buy a 1634 dress shirt, and you wouldn't have to try it on because they were all the same. They had all of them had the same measurements. Now you can't trust that. A 34 pant, for instance, might be a 36 pant. It might be a 32 pant. It could be any number of things. It could fit this way or that way or however. And the same thing with women's. They even have zero measurement, a zero dress size now. I don't know what that means. But the thing is quality has gone out the door. And we wail and gnash our teeth over getting to a $15 an hour minimum wage, whereas if you would just let it go. And the reason that's happening is we're importing cheap labor. And they're doing that on purpose. Again, that's why you're in China. That's why you were in Mexico, is people are making cheap goods with cheap labor. And the quality has gone out the door. People whine about, again, I'm speaking from a male perspective, dress shirts. They'll buy a shirt and it's no good in 6 months. Well, it was made, they made 50 of them in less than an hour or whatever. I was talking to a guy in a chain men's store a couple of years ago, and I forget the number, but they were having their suits made in China, and they were coming off the assembly line. It was I don't remember the number, but it was a very large number of suits off an assembly line, and of course they were cheap, and they don't fit right, and again, now we have people that have gone totally casual, and now I'm ranting. And they look like crap, but their clothes, I mean, even the nice suits and everything don't look all that good. I mean, even people like Polo were going to China and having their upper end suits made. Well, that's not going to work, because a men's suit, almost everything, the best part of it is from the shoulder. If you have to make the shoulders to fit exactly right, and then the rest of the suit follows. So. And that's all quality. You used to be able to buy a screwdriver from Sears. They were known for their quality tools, and people would keep those tools for years. Now they break. Hammers and screwdrivers and pliers and so forth. And there are some people that make quality tools, but I'm using that. And Sears is not around much anymore. I mean, they were the behemoth at one time. Sears and Penny's and Montgomery Ward, and they all went the cheap route. And they're all gone. You have a thing like Facebook. At one time, it was kind of a nice thing, and now the guy's made $1 gazillion, and he's buying up land in Hawaii, and he does not care about the people on Facebook. Matter of fact, he doesn't seem to like them very much. Anyway, I'm going to end that. But George Orwell, back to the original thing. It was great books. He wrote great books. You should read them. They are warnings. They are not instructions. But he was well tuned in to politicians. And when you hear politicians constantly ranting, we have to save our democracy, a lot of them, you need to question them hard, because the last thing on their mind, and they don't really know what a democracy is. Again, the United States is not a democracy. It's a republic, a federal republic with democratic aspects. But anyway, you need to think about that, and you need to get involved. This is the thing, you need to get involved. Our country will not work unless people are involved, and we're seeing some of that come about, and the people are being demonized. Anyway, I've talked too long. Y'all have a nice day.